It was supposed to be just another quiet night of studying. Two roommates, buried in their books, preparing for the final exam that would define our college journey. But as the lights flicked off, everything changed. In the soft glow of a desk lamp, something shifted between us, something we'd been avoiding, unnoticed for far too long. It was a moment that would make me question everything I thought I knew. And it all started with a simple question. What if we weren't just friends? Stay tuned. We were supposed to be studying. After all, this was our final exam, one of the biggest tests of our lives. The weight of it sat heavily between us, like the heavy silence in the room, only broken by the scratch of pens on paper and the turning of pages. But that night, the usual rhythm of our study sessions felt different. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, the organized chaos of books and notes. It wasn't the usual calm anymore. Something had shifted in the air, something unspoken but palpable, like an undercurrent running beneath the surface. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it started. Maybe it was the way Gabriel kept glancing at me, just quick looks, as if he was afraid I'd notice. Or maybe it was the way his fingers brushed against mine ever so slightly as we passed the textbook back and forth. Each time it felt like a spark. The heat of it lingered, but neither of us acknowledged it. We kept going, pretending it was all normal, pretending that this was just another late-night cram session. But we both knew it wasn't. Gabriel, my roommate of 2 years, was a study prodigy. He could breeze through the most complicated cases with little effort, while I had to organize everything meticulously, color-code my notes, and stick to a strict schedule. We balanced each other out perfectly, or so I thought. Gabriel's laid-back charm and natural brilliance complemented my structured, methodical approach. Together, we made an efficient team, yet there was this new tension I couldn't ignore. I glanced up at him as he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting a dim glow over his face. He looked tired, sure, but something else was in his eyes, something I couldn't name. He seemed distant, his usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable, more uncertain. It was subtle, but it was there. I shifted in my seat, trying to focus on the pages in front of me, but it wasn't easy. I couldn't stop noticing the way Gabriel's green eyes lit up when he explained a point, the way his lips would part slightly as he spoke, how every small gesture felt amplified in the quiet. It was as though, in that dim room, our worlds had somehow converged into a space that didn't feel quite as comfortable as it used to. And then, at midnight, when we were both feeling the weight of exhaustion, he asked the question. A simple question, but it changed everything. "Alex," he said softly, his voice carrying a vulnerability that I hadn't heard before. "Have you ever noticed that we never really talk about personal stuff? Like dating, relationships, anything outside of school?" His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I swallowed hard, trying to process what he was implying. We had been roommates for 2 years, yet we had never once crossed the line into territory outside of school, outside of the comfortable routine we'd built. His question made me realize that we'd both been avoiding something we hadn't dared to acknowledge, even though it had been there, lurking beneath the surface for who knows how long. "Yeah, I guess you're right," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. "We've always just focused on school." But Gabriel wasn't buying it. His eyes didn't leave mine, and I could see the hesitation in his expression, like he was gathering the courage to say something he had been holding back. "No, Alex," he said, his voice a little more urgent now. "I think it's because we're both avoiding the same conversation." The air in the room thickened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say. What was he trying to tell me? Was this about us as roommates, or was there something more? He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his hands tense. "What if I told you that I look forward to coming home to you more than anything else? What if I told you that I don't just see you as my roommate anymore?" He paused, studying me carefully. "What would you say to that?" His words hit me like a wave. My mind raced, but my body felt like it was frozen in place. This wasn't just about studying. This wasn't about our final exam anymore. This was something bigger, something that had been building between us for a while now. and neither of us had dared to acknowledge it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to this unspoken truth that Gabriel had just put into words. For the first time, I saw him, not just as my friend, not just as my roommate, but as something more. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The silence stretched on, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. It was a strange silence, one filled with everything we had never said to each other. I wanted to reach across the table, to say something, anything, but I couldn't find the words. I was afraid. "Alex," Gabriel said softly, breaking the silence. "What do you see when you look at me?" I hesitated. The truth was, I saw him as more than just my roommate. More than just the guy who always had his life together. More than just the guy I studied with. But I wasn't ready to admit that yet. I wasn't ready to admit how much I had started to care about him. How much I had started to feel for him beyond friendship. But as I looked at him, I realized that he had already seen through my defenses. He had already noticed the little things, the way I looked at him, the way I cared for him in small, unnoticed ways. He had already seen past the surface, and now it was my turn to do the same. I began, my voice barely a whisper. "I see more than just a roommate. I see you, Gabriel, but I don't know what that means." Gabriel smiled then, a soft, relieved smile. "Thank you," he whispered. In that moment, I knew that nothing would be the same between us again. And I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew we couldn't go back. The unspoken tension had finally been acknowledged, and now we had to face it together. As the words hung between us, something in the room changed, almost imperceptibly, but it was there. The harsh brightness of the overhead lights no longer mattered. The soft glow from the desk lamp was now the only source of light, and somehow, that small change in ambiance made everything feel different. It wasn't just the dim light casting long shadows, or the fact that the air between us felt suddenly thick with unspoken thoughts. No, it was deeper than that. It was as if the room, our shared space for 2 years, had been transformed into a space for something entirely new. Something undefined but undeniable. Gabriel's voice had softened, his words more measured now, but every one of them felt like it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said before. His confession had shifted something within me, something I had been carefully avoiding for so long. All this time, I had built a protective wall around myself, keeping our relationship neatly compartmentalized. Roommates, friends, nothing more. But that wall, just like the harsh lights above us, began to fade away in the quiet of the room, leaving us exposed, raw, and vulnerable. I couldn't stop thinking about what Gabriel had said, the way he had looked at me, the words he had carefully chosen, the realization that I had been avoiding the same conversation, that I had been living in this carefully constructed bubble, suddenly felt suffocating. How had we reached this point? How had we gotten to the place where our friendship, so comfortable, so easy, was now shifting into something else? Gabriel wasn't just asking me to study for a final exam anymore. He was asking me to step out of the comfort zone we had built and venture into a new territory, one that was far more uncertain, far more complicated. But it wasn't just his words. It was the way he said them, the way he leaned forward, the way he was offering something that neither of us had ever dared to acknowledge. A deeper connection, a possibility that we had ignored because we were both too scared to face it. In that moment, I realized something that hit me hard. The lines between us had always been blurry, and we had both been afraid to see that. Our late-night study sessions, our quiet conversations, the way we took care of each other in small, subtle ways, they all hinted at something more, something I had been pushing away for far too long. But Gabriel's vulnerability, his openness, made me question my own feelings. How long had I been holding back? The shift in the room wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It felt as if the space around us was no longer just our apartment. It was a place where everything we had buried was surfacing, a place where we couldn't hide from what was unfolding. There was no going back now, no ignoring what had been building between us. It was also in the way Gabriel responded. His words had been honest, raw, and in that vulnerability, I could see him in a way I never had before. Not just as my roommate, not just as my study partner, but as someone who wanted something more, someone who was willing to take a risk. And I realized then that I was standing at the edge of something unknown, something I hadn't even considered before. I didn't want to overthink it. I didn't want to get lost in the what-ifs and the fear of making things awkward. I wanted to trust that whatever this was, this shift, this tension, this change in the air, it was something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. Gabriel was still watching me, his eyes not searching for an answer but rather for a sign that I was ready to step into this new space with him. He wasn't rushing me, wasn't pressuring me. He was offering the same vulnerability I had been avoiding for so long. And suddenly the realization hit me like a wave. I had been holding back too. Not just from him, but from myself. I had been so caught up in the safe routines of our friendship that I had forgotten how to embrace the possibilities of something more. I had been afraid of what would happen if we crossed that line. But in that moment, I didn't want to be afraid anymore. I didn't want to hide from this feeling, whatever it was. So I let myself feel it, whatever it was. The shift wasn't just in the room, it was in me too. I didn't know where this would go, what it would mean for us as roommates, as friends, as something more. But I knew, deep down, that this change was a chance for something greater than just studying for exams. It was a chance to explore what we had buried for so long, to give in to something real and raw. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't need to. What mattered was that the air between us had changed, and that change felt like a promise, an unspoken understanding that we had crossed a threshold together and neither of us could go back. The moment hung between us like a breath waiting to be taken. Gabriel's words were soft, but they echoed loudly in my chest. I've been trying not to notice things about you for months. And in that space, I couldn't pretend I didn't feel the weight of his confession, the vulnerability that dripped from his words. It wasn't like we hadn't known each other for 2 years. We had spent countless hours together, shared late-night study sessions, small jokes over coffee, moments of understanding without saying a word. Yet, in that dimly lit kitchen, something shifted. It wasn't just about us as roommates, as friends. It was about everything we had unknowingly hidden from each other, from ourselves. I wanted to tell him that I had noticed too, that there were moments when I caught myself thinking about him in ways I shouldn't have. Moments when the line between friendship and something more felt thinner, weaker. But I didn't say those words. I couldn't. Because in that silence, in that pause, I felt the weight of what would happen if I crossed that line. I felt fear. Not because of Gabriel, but because of what it would mean for everything we had. But as Gabriel leaned in closer, his eyes never leaving mine, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't afraid of what we could be. I was afraid of letting myself want something so real, so vulnerable, so risky. Because what if it didn't work? What if I said yes and it ruined everything? What if our friendship, the one thing I cherished the most, was torn apart by something we could never take back? But when Gabriel asked me again, when he said, "What do you see when you look at me?" I realized that I wasn't the only one carrying that same fear. He had been holding his breath too, waiting for me to say something, anything. And in that moment, with the weight of his gaze on me, I couldn't lie. I couldn't pretend. The truth was already in my heart, waiting to come out. So, when I finally spoke, my voice was small but steady. I don't see just my roommate. My heart thudded in my chest, the words hanging between us like a fragile promise. Gabriel's face softened, and for a moment, it felt like the air between us was lighter, like the weight of the unspoken had finally been released. And then, in one quiet breath, it all changed. "I'm tired of pretending," he whispered. And those words were the key, unlocking something in both of us that had been sealed shut for far too long. We had been playing it safe, hiding behind our roles as roommates, as friends. But now, all the walls were gone, and there was nothing left but honesty. "I want you, Alex," he said, his voice rough with the weight of all the months, all the moments he had held back. "I need you to know that." I didn't have time to respond, not that I needed to, because in the next second his lips were on mine, soft and tentative at first, as if he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. I didn't want to. There was no room for fear anymore, no space for doubts. In that kiss, in the warmth of his hands on my skin, all the questions, all the hesitation faded away. When we pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine, his hands still holding my face, as if afraid that if he let go, this moment would slip away. "Alex," he whispered again, his voice almost trembling. "If you say yes to this, I won't stop. I won't be able to go back to pretending." And I understood, more than I had ever understood anything in my life. This wasn't just about the kiss. This wasn't about a moment of passion or desire. This was about choosing each other, about crossing a boundary we'd been too afraid to touch for so long. It was about risking everything, our friendship, our comfort, our safety, for the chance to discover something real. I didn't need to think about it. I didn't need time. I was ready. "Yes," I whispered, and the world shifted forever. The fear was still there, of course, but it no longer felt like something to be avoided. It was something to be faced, together. In that kiss, in that simple, soft word, everything between us changed. There was no going back now. But somehow, for the first time, I didn't want to. Gabriel's confession had opened something in both of us, and I realized that I was ready for whatever came next. What had started as a study session, something simple and familiar, had turned into a defining moment for both of us. And as I kissed him back, deeper this time, with a hunger that matched his own, I understood. Sometimes the most terrifying, life-altering decisions come in the form of quiet confessions, whispered in the dark, when you least expect it. The room felt smaller, more intimate, the moment his words settled between us. "If you say yes to this, I won't stop." Gabriel's voice, usually so steady, trembled ever so slightly as if he was holding back a lifetime of feelings. And for a moment, the world outside that quiet kitchen faded away. It was just him, just us. I could feel the electricity in the air, the tension in every inch of my body. My heart raced as I realized that, for the first time, I wasn't just hearing his words, I was living them. The weight of what we were about to do hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. I had spent 2 years with this person, living in the same space, sharing everything from study notes to late-night snacks, and yet I hadn't noticed the depth of what was here between us until now. In that instant, everything changed. There was no going back to how things had been before, no pretending that our friendship was just that, no more avoiding the truth we had both been running from. His confession had cracked open the door to something new, something raw and real, and I was standing at the edge, waiting for him to lead the way. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts, but my heart knew this was the moment. This was the choice I had to make. Gabriel's eyes never wavered, full of vulnerability, full of longing, and for the first time, I saw him for what he truly was. Not just my roommate, not just my friend, but someone I wanted in ways I hadn't let myself admit before. "I'm sure," he breathed, and before I could say another word, his lips were on mine. The kiss was soft at first, almost tentative, like we were both testing the waters, unsure if we were truly ready for what came next. But as our mouths met, something deep within me shifted. The hesitation melted away, replaced by a flood of emotions that had been waiting too long to be expressed. It was like a dam breaking, and for the first time I felt free. No more holding back, no more hiding. I kissed him back, and this time, there was nothing tentative about it. There was a hunger, a desperation, as if we were both claiming something we had unknowingly been waiting for. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I could feel the heat radiating between us. Everything I had been afraid of, losing our friendship, complicating things, faded into the background. All that mattered in that moment was the undeniable connection between us. I could feel every inch of him, his body pressed against mine, his warmth enveloping me like a blanket. His lips were soft but insistent, exploring mine with a gentleness that made my heart ache. And as his hand slid to my face, cupping it like I was the most precious thing in the world, I realized how much I had needed this, how much I had wanted him in ways I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. When we finally broke apart, breathless, our foreheads touched, and for a brief second, everything felt right. Everything felt like it was always meant to be this way. The confusion, the doubt, it all disappeared, replaced by a quiet certainty that we were meant to cross this line together. "Are you sure?" he asked again, his voice low, rough with emotion. And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure," I whispered back. And just like that, we crossed the line. The line between friendship and something deeper, something more. It wasn't just about the kiss. It was about everything that came with it. The vulnerability, the risk, the promise that things would never be the same again. There was no going back now, but that was okay. Because as we stood there, in the quiet of our kitchen, I realized that sometimes, the things we're most afraid of are the things that bring us the most clarity. Gabriel and I were no longer just roommates. We weren't just friends. We were two people who had taken the chance to love each other, to be something real. And in that moment, with his hands still holding me close, I knew that whatever came next, whatever this was, we would face it together. Because sometimes the first kiss isn't just about physical connection. It's about opening the door to everything you've been afraid to want, everything you've been too scared to admit. And as we stood there, still in each other's arms, I realized how deeply I wanted this. Not just for the night, but for everything that lay ahead. The uncertainty, the excitement, the joy, the love. And so, with one kiss, the world shifted, and everything that had been waiting, quietly hidden, was finally allowed to come to life. The morning after felt like walking through a dream I wasn't sure I was ready to wake up from. I lay there in the soft light filtering through the blinds, feeling the warmth of Gabriel's body still pressed against mine, the slow rise and fall of his chest in the quiet. Everything felt different. In the moments before sleep claimed me, I had tried to gather my thoughts, tried to make sense of everything that had happened, but I couldn't. It wasn't just the kiss, the touch, the closeness. It was the vulnerability, the weight of what had shifted between us. And now, with the morning sun creeping through the window, all the uncertainty I had pushed down came rushing back. I hadn't expected this, not really. Sure, we had always had a connection, something deeper than just friendship, but I didn't know what this was going to mean for us. For me, for him, what would it mean when the morning came? Would the excitement of last night fade, replaced by regret or awkwardness? Or had we both just taken a step towards something more real than either of us could have imagined? The room felt oddly still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of every little sound, the faint hum of the fridge, the rustling of sheets, the soft sighs between breaths. Gabriel was still asleep, his arm loosely draped over me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different now. I had to admit, my heart was racing, caught between two emotions: fear and relief. Fear that this would somehow ruin everything, our friendship, the dynamic we had built over the past 2 years. What if this was a mistake? What if we woke up and realized that what had felt so right in the moment was now something we couldn't take back? The consequences of crossing that line, the potential for things to change in ways we couldn't control, weighed on me. But then there was the relief that I had said yes, that I had chosen to be vulnerable, to take that step with him. The relief of knowing that, despite the fear, this was exactly where I wanted to be, in his arms, not just as roommates, not just as friends, but as something more, something deeper. I reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from Gabriel's face, my fingers lingering for a second longer than necessary. In the dim morning light, he looked peaceful, serene even. And I couldn't help but smile, despite the tightness in my chest. I had been living with him, sharing space, thoughts, and quiet moments. But this was different. This intimacy, this closeness. It wasn't something I had ever expected, yet here it was. Something I couldn't deny anymore. As I watched him sleep, I thought about everything we had shared. The times we laughed until our sides ached, the times we argued over nothing, the countless nights of studying side by side. But last night had been something entirely new. A moment of truth that neither of us had been brave enough to face until now. And now, the morning after, the question loomed in the air. Where do we go from here? The silence was thick, almost heavy, as I carefully shifted in bed, trying not to disturb him. I wanted to stay there forever, wrapped up in the peace of the moment, but I knew we couldn't just ignore what had happened. Gabriel stirred beside me, his eyes fluttering open, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. "Morning," he murmured, voice thick with sleep, but there was something different in it, something deeper. The casual ease we usually had was gone, replaced by something softer, something fragile. I smiled, though a small part of me was still uncertain, still trying to piece together what I was feeling. "Morning," I replied, my voice quieter than usual. My heart was still beating faster than it should have been. He blinked a few times, as if trying to adjust to the reality of the morning, just as I was. And then, without saying anything more, he reached out, pulling me into him, his arms wrapping around me with the same warmth that had comforted me all night. And in that embrace, I felt both fear and relief mixed together. Fear of the unknown, but relief that we had crossed this line together. "I don't regret this," Gabriel said, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence between us. I could hear the sincerity in his words, and it made something inside me shift again. I didn't know what was ahead for us, but in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. And that, somehow, made everything feel okay. Because this wasn't just about what had happened last night, it was about what we were willing to build together, to fight for. It was about trust and honesty and vulnerability. It was about finally saying yes to what we had both been too scared to acknowledge for far too long. The fear still lingered, of course. It was hard to let go of something so familiar, to step into a new chapter where nothing was guaranteed. But the relief was louder, stronger, and for the first time I wasn't afraid to take that next step. And so we lay there, in that quiet moment, knowing that things had changed but unsure exactly how. We didn't need to figure it all out right then, not yet. We had time to navigate this new reality, to see where it would take us. For now, though, it was enough to be here, together, in the quiet aftermath of something beautiful. And I think that's what love is sometimes. Quiet, messy, uncertain, but real. And in that moment, that was enough. The morning light was soft, filtering through the blinds, casting a warm glow across the room. I was still wrapped in the blanket of the night we had shared, both the exhilaration and the uncertainty settling inside me. As I lay there next to Gabriel, something shifted in my chest, something deeper than I had anticipated. We were at a crossroads now, between everything that was familiar and the unknown that loomed ahead. We had crossed a line, one that neither of us could undo, but there was a quiet comfort in knowing that we had crossed it together. I could still feel the warmth of his arms around me, the sense of safety that had always been there, but now wrapped in something new, something more. As I turned to look at him, still sleeping peacefully beside me, I realized that what I felt for Gabriel wasn't just a passing moment or a fleeting connection. It was deeper than that. It wasn't just the spark from last night, the kiss that changed everything. It was a sense of knowing, of understanding, of feeling seen in ways I had never experienced before. But still, doubts crept in. Was this just the aftermath of a night filled with emotion, or was this the beginning of something real? Was I ready to embrace what was unfolding between us, or was I afraid of what it meant for our friendship, our future? "Good morning." Gabriel's voice broke through my thoughts, warm and soft. I turned to face him, meeting his eyes. There was something different in them now, something that hadn't been there before. It was an openness, an understanding. It was a quiet strength, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hide or hold back. "Morning," I said, my voice shaky but sure. He smiled, that familiar smile that had always made my heart race, but now it felt like it carried something more. "So, we're doing this?" he asked, his words light, but there was something serious in his tone, something grounded. I swallowed, the weight of his question settling on me. "I think we are," I said, the words coming out with more certainty than I had expected. And just like that, the commitment began. It wasn't about grand gestures or making promises we couldn't keep. It wasn't about knowing exactly what the future held. It was about saying yes, about choosing to face what came next together. We didn't have all the answers, not yet, but we had something stronger than certainty. We had trust. We had respect, and most importantly, we had each other. As the days passed, there was a quiet understanding between us. We didn't rush. We didn't try to force anything. Instead, we allowed the relationship to grow at its own pace, like the slow unfolding of a flower. Every small moment, every touch, every laugh we shared was a piece of the foundation we were building. There were moments of uncertainty, of course. Questions about how we would navigate the changes, about what it would mean for our lives moving forward. But the one thing that was clear was that we weren't alone in this anymore. We were in it together. Gabriel and I had spent so much time avoiding the truth, hiding from what had always been there. But now, with each passing day, we were moving forward, learning about each other in ways we hadn't before, and it felt right, even when it was hard. Even when we didn't have all the answers. In those quiet moments, when we would just sit together and let the world pass by, I realized something. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to know what tomorrow would bring. What mattered was that I was willing to take the next step. I was ready to move forward, to embrace this new chapter with Gabriel. Because sometimes that's all it takes, the willingness to move forward, even when the path ahead is unclear. It's about choosing to stay, to work through the challenges, and to grow together. And with Gabriel by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were something more, something that had the potential to be everything. "I'm glad we're doing this," I said quietly, my hand finding his. "Me too," Gabriel replied, squeezing my hand gently. Together. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the biggest step isn't the one we take first. It's the one we take together, after everything else has been said and done. As I sat there, wrapped in the quiet of the moment, I realized just how much had changed in such a short time. It wasn't just the act of crossing that line, of acknowledging something neither of us had dared to admit for so long. It was everything that came after, the commitment, the vulnerability, and the understanding that no matter what came next, we were in this together. We didn't have all the answers, we didn't need to. In the end, it was the choice to move forward, to be present for each other, that made all the difference. We weren't rushing to define what we were, but we were opening ourselves to what we could become. We were learning to trust, not just each other, but ourselves. The days after that night felt like a slow exhale, like breathing after holding your breath for far too long. There was peace now, where there had once been doubt. The quiet wasn't filled with unanswered questions or the fear of what might happen. Instead, it was filled with anticipation, excitement for what we could build together. What I learned in those moments was simple, yet profound. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't stepping into the unknown. It's allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to embrace it. And that's what we had done. We had taken the leap together, without knowing where it would lead, but with the belief that it was worth it. The world outside our little bubble continued on, busy and loud, but within our shared space, everything had changed. No more pretending, no more hiding behind the safe walls we had built around ourselves. What we had was real, raw, and as imperfect as it was beautiful. It wasn't about perfect moments or grand gestures. It was about showing up, about being there for each other in ways we hadn't known we needed. We didn't have to have everything figured out. That was never the point. The point was that we were choosing this, choosing each other, every day, without fear of what it might cost. It wasn't about the promises we made in that quiet room or the plans we made for the future. It was about the present, the now, and what we could create together. And that's what made it so powerful. Because love isn't always about finding something perfect. It's about building something real, something lasting, even when the future is uncertain. It's about finding a person who sees you, who understands you, who wants to walk beside you, even through the hard times. As I lay beside Gabriel, I knew we were just beginning. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. And the best part? We were writing it together, one step at a time. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes, the most beautiful things are the ones that happen when we stop holding back, when we stop protecting ourselves from the possibility of love. It's in the quiet moments, in the soft touches, in the words we dare to speak, and in the ones we finally allow ourselves to hear. And if we're lucky, we find someone who's willing to walk beside us through it all. Someone who's not afraid to say yes, to take that step forward, to move into the unknown with us. That's how real love begins. And as Gabriel's hand intertwined with mine, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to see where it would take us. As we wrap up this journey, I want you to take a moment to reflect on what we've just explored together. Sometimes the most powerful moments in life aren't about grand gestures or perfect timing. They're about vulnerability, about the quiet decisions we make to step forward, even when the future feels uncertain. It's about saying yes when it scares you, and trusting that the leap is worth it. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's that love doesn't always fit into neat boxes. It's messy, it's imperfect, and it's real. And the most beautiful part? You get to decide how it unfolds. So, whether you're in a similar situation or just beginning to realize what's in front of you, remember, don't hold back. Take that step and embrace the connection. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own life and relationships, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep these conversations going, because sometimes the courage to speak your truth is all it takes to change everything.